Hi there boys and girls, Brucey here. I hope you are all doing well out there. Welcome to the third edition of Guitarcast. This time not only am I joined by Sanj, I am also joined by the amazing Preben. Here is a little bit of Preben in action. To the team. Today we are going for the controversial topic of how important is gear. Stay tuned, love to hear your comments on this one. Okay, hello everyone, welcome to the third edition of Guitarcast. Today I have Sanj and Preben with me and we are going to be discussing how important is gear. So here we go. How important is gear?
Not very.
No, not really. Next. No, it is. Of course, it's important. It's important to have something that doesn't get in your way. Say, if you want to play sort of Jimi Hendrix rhythm stuff or Nile Rodgers, you might not want a Gibson L5. That'll make it difficult. Of course, on the other hand, you could say if you have a Gibson L5 and you try to make that sound come out of it, something new and exciting might happen. But generally, just as long as it's not, you know, obstructive to what you do, I think anything goes, really.
Okay, so here's an interesting one. Neil and me have been at complete odds with this for the last 30 years, yeah? Neil has always been so into the gear. He has bought so much gear, tried out so much gear. We're talking like recording equipment, we're talking pedals, we're talking guitars, we're talking amps, cabinets. He's been through them all and tried them out. I have had like 2 amps in that entire time and now an acoustic guitar, which I barely plug in. So just recorded with a microphone. So yeah, we're at complete odds on that spectrum.
Well, I'm kind of in the middle then, because I've had, and I'm not saying this with any great pride but only frustration, I've had in excess of 100 amps.
Whoa.
In order to try and find what it was that I wanted to hear. I mean, I buy and sell, and I've always bought. Being left-handed did kind of sort of put a dampener on buying guitars, and now I've sort of found what I want, and that's it. And of course, I've found out relatively early that, well, not early actually, relatively late, that it all sounds the same anyway, more or less to a certain extent, because what you're trying to do is what you hear in your head. So you end up, you know, even if you're on a master volume Marshall, and what you really want to hear is Dick Dale, you'll turn the knobs so that you end up with something that's as close to Dick Dale as you can possibly get from that amp. And that's what I mean. If you have something that's roughly, you know, it'll be easier to do on a twin, of course. So that's what I mean by having something that's not in the way. Whether you do it on a Pro Reverb or on a twin, I don't think matters that much, personally.
I think the general question comes down to the my important. Yeah, Sanj has summed it up quite well, and that's why I thought this would be a good topic to talk about. Is that I'm quite interested in gear, and that to me is part of the journey. But what it comes down to, what it comes down to for me as well is, you're always. I think my approach is slightly different. There's a part of me also when gigging, who wants to find the easiest solution but the most reliable solution, because I think gigging definitely puts a different slant on it than recording, and in the recording side of things, having lots, or at least lots of variants of gear is there to allow you to have flavors. That's your spice rack, and you can you know, be inspired by using different combinations and create new sound. Whereas gigging, I think it comes down to, for me, is the idea that you want something, A, that's reliable, B, that's going to take the abuse, and C, ultimately, and particularly as you get older, is super light and you can throw it in the back of the car and you're on your way home from a gig as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think with the gigging side of things, I mean, this whole thing, you know, and I've been one of these guys that would sit and program different kinds of pre-delay on the reverb for different tracks and all that. Actually, probably not, because that wasn't really out, but certainly different delay times and all of that stuff. And it kind of came about from gigging in London without a car. There's only so much you can take, and then you really realize, okay, well, I think it has more of an impact on the general outcome, whether you have, you know, 1 or 2 gin and tonics before you go on, you know, or whether you have eye contact with the audience or whatever. For me, the whole idea of being completely consumed in dancing around on the pedal board, it's just, that's not what it's about for me. And that's not to say that it's a bad thing or anything. It's just not. I want to. I mean, I have an insanely simple setup. I use one sound, and then if I want it dirtier, I turn up the guitar, and if I want it cleaner, I turn it down. That's it. And I'm fully aware that there's certain things where you can't. That approach doesn't work. But it does mean that I can look at people pretty much all the time, unless I'm looking at the fretboard, trying to figure out what went wrong. But so I'm all for simplicity, especially live.
Yeah, I mean, I did a video a while back, and it was quite, I guess, a clickbaity title, is "No one cares about your sound." And that's something that I've come to realize over all the years of gigging, is ultimately, apart from the 1 or 2 geeky guitar players at the back of the audience who are just looking for anything to slight you on, no one gives a shit about your sound when you're in a live gig. And as long as it's not bad, and as long as it's kind of close enough to what it should be like, then, I mean, if you're playing Enter Sandman with the cleanest tone in the world, then maybe, but you know,
well, that's an interesting thing. Are we talking sort of carbon copy covers, or are we talking, what are we talking?
I think, okay, sorry, yeah, and at the moment I've said that, and I know there is a point. If you are in a tribute band who are a Pink Floyd tribute band or whatever, then I guess the expectation to have the exact carbon copy of the sound is there.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are just in in your own generic band doing your own original material, no one cares, because they don't know, they've got nothing to compare it about. And if you're in a most generic function, corporate band, wedding band, on the whole, no one cares. All they're caring about is how much drink they can have before the bar closes.
Are you disillusioned at all with the music business?
No.
Aren't we all?
I don't know. I mean, where would you rather be? That's the question, isn't it? I don't know. But I mean, going back to the sound thing, I have a theory. Unsurprisingly, I have a theory about this. And my theory is this: the least amount of effects you can play with and still feel comfortable, and the least amount of gain you can play with and still feel comfortable in terms of sustain and stuff, and of course, again, if you need to have a crunch sound, you need to crunch, the better your sound will be perceived. Certainly when it comes to delays and reverbs in particular, they're only there for your own sake. The further away you get from the source, the drier it is, the bigger it'll sound.
Well, I mean, reverb is an interesting one. I'll go over to Sanj here, because Sanj, you've completely changed over the years in the sense of you are now primarily, I'd say it's safe to say, playing acoustic guitar. Yeah. So the gear that you're using, it's there to enable you to do what exactly?
Okay, so here is my story about gear. So when I used to play electric guitar, honestly, Neil would sit there and he'd fiddle with all the knobs and try and get the best sound out of his pedals. I hated doing that. I bent down and I would fiddle with it and I'd go, this sounds a little bit better, this sounds a little bit better. Come back 10 minutes later, I don't like this sound now. So in the end, I got to the point of, I've got a sound. I don't enjoy fiddling with this stuff. I enjoy playing guitar. That's why I'm here. I'm not interested in all that stuff. I want to play the music. Last year, I had some acoustic gigs, and I haven't done a lot of them. So, and this time I want to use my loop pedal. And with using the loop pedal, I wanted to also include a electric guitar and a cajon. So I started thinking, how can I get all this working? Do I need 2 amps so I can get a good frequency range so the sound isn't muddy through everything? Do I get some kind of splitter, and do I do this? And my head kind of started exploding, and it all became about, how do I do this? How do I get the acoustic guitar plugged in and the electric guitar plugged in? And in the end, I looked at all this equipment. I spoke to Neil about it, and I looked at Anderton's website and was trying to like buy lots of stuff. And I just thought, you know what? Just plug a microphone in here, put it into your amp, swap the lead for the electric and the acoustic when you need them, and job done. Everything is simple. Keep it as simple as possible. I just didn't need to go through all this like few weeks of worry about gear, because like you guys are saying, just keep it simple, man.
Yeah, I mean, and you now are not using you're not really using any effects either, are you? You're just going straight into your amp with a little bit of reverb.
Straight into my amp. So when I was doing these acoustic gigs, I was also playing on the main stage at one point, and it was just a local festival, and the guys aren't, sound engineers; they're just volunteers. And I was really quite worried about how I'm going to get a decent sound on this massive stage. I wanted to take my amp and take an output from the amp, but it was just impractical to carry it across the field for the 1-2 songs I was playing. So I ended up playing in my an ME50, Boss ME50 pedal, plugging it in, and honestly, it DI'd into the sound desk, and it was just a gorgeous sound. So yeah, gear is just not important. It's all about, like you guys are saying, so as long as you've got a decent sound, no one knows.
I know it's not. I mean, I think the problem with especially guitar players is that it takes very, very little for us to not feel comfortable. If you're playing and you're used to having a certain touch and a certain sound, and then all of a sudden there's a little bit less sustain and thing, it all falls apart. If you're a sort of high gain player, which I also like to dabble in, and you want that sort of sustain thing, and all of a sudden you switch everything off and it just goes pling. And then of course it's got to be detrimental to your performance. So I think it's a question of trying to build up as much as you possibly can a relationship with the guitar where you can do as much as what you want to do without any effects. The amp is a slightly different matter because it's kind of integral to the sound. It is part of the instrument. And of course, if you're the edge, you need your delays and all that stuff. But if we're talking about people who generally use delays and reverbs in order to soften things, I mean, I use delay because I get very scared if it's not there. I think, God Almighty, that's very dry. And certain places when you're out and you end up in a sort of a dry hole on stage, and you think it's just like an ice pick in the back of your head. Buck. And of course, we're not even coming to the whole Kemper in-ear side of things, but for now we're talking about I suspect amps on stage, and you have to have, of course, so that you feel comfortable. But again, it depends on where your focus where you want your you see somebody like Graham Coxon, and he's playing his pedals. He really is, and I mean that in a good way. He'll bend over and he'll twist something in it, and all hell breaks loose, and it's great. It's fantastic. It's a million miles away from anything I would ever do, but I love it. I think it's marvelous. So of course, it's different rules.
Yeah, different. I think one of the things that this topic brings about to me is that the internet is now this way, particularly on YouTube where we are, of 1 million gear reviews and pedal reviews and all these things, and people like thinking that this pedal is better than that pedal and blah 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 and all this stuff. I mean, when I think a generic question, sorry, lost the plot there completely. I'm making no sense. I suppose what I mean is, as well, is buying a good piece of gear also means that you are no longer on that, you know, quest. If I just so happen to have this here, for example, this overdrive pedal, which I've had, Boss OD3, which I've had since 1991. So to me, that's an important piece of gear, and it's a good piece of gear. And I think, Sanj, you're in the same kind of category. A lot of the stuff you've had is the first stuff you bought. So there's another subtext to this question of actually getting a good piece of gear, rather than just keep buying lots and lots of things, buying something well to begin with, and sticking with it.
Yes. What you were saying about lots of reviews on the internet and everything, I had this in the 90s when obviously there was less internet and more magazines. I felt under pressure to work on this is when I was playing more electric guitars. I was under pressure to find a sound, and people would go out and they'd buy pedals, and you look at magazines and everyone's talking about this sound of this pedal, and everyone will be looking at these settings that this guy is using to get this sound. And I just honestly, I felt so under pressure, like I was missing something. That, you know, actually I'm quite happy playing guitar with a little, even without any effects on, or with a distortion on, and that was all I needed. And it was just, I could enjoy that. But there is this pressure to have an interest in all this stuff.
I think that pressure also comes from a marketing perspective of magazines wanting to, and the internet wanting to sell you new things and new products. Just going back slightly to one of the things you said about me early on, about, you know, me having a little bit of everything, and there is another side to me, of course, which is my complete obsession with sound and sound design and sound creation. So a lot of this gear falls into that kind of experimental pattern, and it kind of crosses over into the guitar. But probably for me in the last 10 years, it's very much died down, because you just want something that is reliable. And that's, you know, one thing I've come to really appreciate about gear, and you realize that maybe also sometimes you have to pay a little bit more for it, is something that, you know, week in, week out, 2, 3, 4 times a week, you can step on it, you can throw it around, and it's just going to perform. And some of the things you buy aren't particularly sexy. I'm thinking now power supplies. Now, to me, power supply is probably one of the most important things, and the least sexy thing. So that piece of gear is really important, because without that, nothing's going to happen, potentially. Yet 50 flavors of overdrive may be less so important these days, or for me anyway.
I mean, it's a funny thing, because I can totally relate to the experimental thing, because I say it doesn't matter, and I say that after, dear God, 40 God, no, when you want to say that, 45 years, not quite 45, but nearly 45, but certainly 42 years of searching for something. And I say it doesn't matter, and now I've ended up with a Telecaster with Alnico 2 pickups, very important, where I've slanted the bridge pickup the other way because I like that better, and a Dumble clone amp into a Jensen Neo. So yeah, it's not important because I've got what I want. It's, you know, then it's easy. It's a bit like a first world person saying to people in the third world, yeah, well, you know, material stuff doesn't really make you happy. You do know that, don't you?
How did you find out that you liked this slanted this way? How did you discover that?
I just thought it was too thick on the low end, and I thought it was, you know how a Telecaster could be sort of slightly piercing in the high end, and I thought, well, maybe if we switch it around the other way. So I got a router out and you know, away in the old Telecaster there, and got a bridge, which was very easy to get. Of course, being left-handed, I just had to buy a right-handed one, and they are easy to find. And slanted it the other way, and the difference is enormous, actually. I've got two identical guitars here. One again being left-handed. I can grab the main one. It's this one here. I don't know if you can see it. So that's your slant going the other way, and
it's all the wrong way round.
It is. I mean, everything's the wrong way around over here. I'm afraid it's bad, very bad. And then instead of a toggle switch, this is how gear is not important. All right. Instead of a toggle switch, I've got like a pan switch. So so I can have neck pickup, both of them, bridge pickup, but then I can also have both of them, but with more focus on that one, but that one's still in. So you don't have to get... What I'm trying to do, I'm trying to get away from that sort of gear shift, gear change kind of approach to it, where you step on a pedal and flick the pickup switch. I want to try and see it more as a holistic thing, whereas the instrument is all fluid and it's all shades of the same thing, so to speak. So that's how that came about. So therefore, because of all this, and then on top of everything being left-handed, so you can't just go out and borrow one if it breaks down. I've got another one which is a identical backup, literally a backup, and on that one I haven't actually had this changed yet. So I was able to do a direct. This is the root to all terribleness, a direct A/B comparison, which one should never do, because it never leads to anything good, and I still do it, unfortunately. And it's amazing how little, how much difference it makes with that tiny little change. On the standard one, instant cowboy hat and Stetson and the whole lot, it just gets that. And the other way around, more of a sort of, dare I say, sort of a Larry Carlton kind of Robin Ford vibe.
There's some equations you can use to do the calculations. Do you remember those equations, Sanj?
No. Thankfully.
They do exist, though.
No, sorry, I'm rambling. As soon as I get started talking about how little importance all of this has,
But let's ask another variation on the question. Have either of you, so this is, again, maybe going back to a more gigging experience, but have either of you either never got turned down for a gig because of gear, or had someone come up to you at a gig and say it sounds awful? Has gear ever impeded your kind of gigging life? I mean, one example I'm trying to think is, have you ever been for an audition or something, and then someone said, we're not hiring you because you've not got a pedal?
No, that has never happened. You're absolutely right. That has never happened.
And also, like, say, gigging, when you're doing that, do you get compliments on the way you sound? Do people just not care, or do you get people coming up shouting and screaming that you're not using authentic?
There's always one. No.
There's a guitar player, yeah.
People are generally just there to listen to the music, aren't they? And as long as you don't sound terrible.
I play sort of rock and roll stuff, and of course the guitar is quite central to all of that stuff. And I mean, I don't want to sound like an idiot, but I do get compliments every now and again. But again, I think that's mainly because it's not noisy and terrible sounding. It sounds like a guitar, and people are not used to that anymore. And I mean, by that I don't mean it sounds like who can we think of with a super clean? It doesn't sound like Les Paul. That's a terrible example, because he actually doesn't sound like a guitar most of the time, which is great.
Nile Rodgers
doesn't sound like Hank Marvin, put it that way. But you can still hear an element of... I always try to sort of make it sound like wood. I like the sound of wood, and that can be anything. I mean, even early Van Halen sounds very much like wood. Thin Lizzy sounds like wood to me. Metallica doesn't sound so much. Then you're into something a bit more, well, metal-like, and a little bit less sort of... There's less of a bloom on the tone, to me. But then again, it could all be that I'm a leftover from a time where things sounded that way, and some people hear that and they go, "Oh, that's lovely." Somebody is as old-fashioned as me. That
But
I don't know.
What's interesting as well is I've found that there's all this stuff online. There's probably a gazillion years of content about which valve and which blah blah blah, which preamp in a pedal. But ultimately, in the real world, if we talk about the real world, a lot of people, and this is no slight on people, and this is just a sweeping, horrible generalization, a lot of people I come across cannot tell the difference between a bass guitar, an electric guitar, and sometimes an acoustic guitar, let alone the difference between a lead guitar and a rhythm guitar.
Absolutely. So, when I used to play,
have you come across this?
When I first picked up a guitar, I was like, I'd listen to music, I have no idea what I'm listening to. I thought there was a such thing as a lead guitar and a rhythm guitar. Yeah, listening to bass. Yeah.
But then again, we're not doing it for. I mean, let's not beat about the bush here. We're not doing it for people. You know, we're not doing it to. We're playing for people. It's great to play for people. It's great to feel that you move people and you get a response, or you catch somebody's eye, or you can feel it in the room or whatever. That's wonderful. But you're not picking up I'm not putting Alnico 2 pickups in my Telecaster rather than Alnico 5 because I think, the general public, they'll enjoy this more. Of course not. I'm doing it because I enjoy it more, which is the reason why I picked up the bloody thing in the first place, because I felt some sort of affinity with the thing. And that's again coming back to what I was saying about, as long as it doesn't get in the way of what you're doing, it actually enables you to connect more directly with the audience so that you can share an experience of live music where it doesn't become about the pre-delay. I mean, we've all been to these concerts where it's a bunch of guitar players, and I have been one of those guitar players, waiting to be impressed. Bill Kirchen. I went to see Bill Kirchen some years back, and he had this word. Here's a geezer pleaser for you, and that's quite what you want to try to play so that the girls like it. That's always been a good, and not like you as a sort of thing, but girls are not so easily tricked. That's the thing. They don't care about pre-delay. They want to hear stuff that moves them.
Just bring it back to that though. Talking about and something you mentioned earlier, Preben, but I want to put this one over to Sanj. Is you were talking, Preben, about the importance of things like delay and reverb because it's that sound and that's that feeling, and that you need the sound to exist in a space, which the electric guitar ultimately doesn't. Do you have problems, Sanj, when playing, but with an acoustic, because ultimately all the time the acoustic feels and plays the same?
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
It is fair to say.
Do you have days where it doesn't your fingers aren't working, or it just doesn't sound right?
Yeah, it stays the same. That's why I never need to plug in. And actually, when I plug in, I'm getting a different sound than I'm used to.
Yeah, I mean, because one of the things it seems that for electric guitarists, let's put them in that category, reverb or delay is kind of important because it gives you that sense of giving something which doesn't have a sense of space, and it gives you that comfort blanket.
Yes.
So there's nothing better than putting a reverb time of 10 seconds and then you're the best guitarist in the world because everything just blends into one another.
Yeah.
And when you lose that, and I think that's something which happens when gigging because of the nature of acoustics, in the fact that when people are setting up patches at home and guitar sounds at home, it's just you in a space. And then you go into another space, that reverb is totally taken out of context because you've got the reverb of the hall, but also you've then got other instruments. And other instruments, then the phenomena of masking occurs and your tone just disappears because it becomes the part of something else. And I think that's something that a lot of internet people need to kind of wake up to, is that, you can have the most amazing pedal board, the most amazing amp, but ultimately you put it in the context of a band and your frequency range that you actually operate in is really small. So if you've got something which is pumping out a whole load of bass and at home sounds like the biggest, in a gigging context, that's absolutely rubbish, and the sound guy's probably going to filter it all out anyway. Which I guess doesn't really apply with acoustic.
No, with an acoustic guitar, what you're trying to do is recreate the sound of the acoustic guitar, aren't you? You're trying to make it sound as natural as possible, as opposed to an electric guitar where you're trying to do pretty much the opposite of that. Which is why, I guess, another reason why I have gone on to playing the acoustic guitar, because I don't have to worry about anything. I can literally pick up and play. I just don't have to worry about gear.
Can I throw a controversial one at you then, in terms of how important is gear and acoustic guitar?
Mm-hmm.
Would you say, though, that there is certain levels of acoustic guitar in terms of quality and performance?
As in buying an acoustic guitar?
Buying an acoustic guitar, yeah.
In performance, that's an interesting one. I've not owned many guitars. Again, like I never owned many amps. I literally have two acoustic guitars that I play. When I go into a shop and I play a £2,000 guitar, £3,000 guitar, mine's like a grand's worth of guitar I've had for 20 years, a Takamine. Yes, I feel a difference when I play those guitars in that they are nicer to play. They sound perhaps a little bit better, but not enough for me to want to go out and spend that extra couple of grand and say, you know what, my life's going to change if I buy this £3 acoustic guitar because it sounds 10% better. My guitar already sounds better because my sound is coming from my music.
This is something that I'm constantly up against teaching, because my camera's stopped working. Because I'm constantly asked, what's better, blah, 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 what should I buy, what should I buy, what's better? There is a little bit of a law of diminishing returns, in the sense that if you compare a £50 acoustic from Argos to maybe a £300-400 acoustic, there is a big difference. And then you kind of get this start to trail off. Maybe the difference between £300 to £1,000, and I suppose this applies to guitars as well, is, you know, there is some difference. And most of that is ultimately down to the quality control that they've probably put in at the factory to make sure it's set up nicely. And then as you go over that, and this can be for monitors, for microphones, as you go over that, the returns are so small that the majority of people won't need them. And I think when you start to go over a certain price, particularly with actual guitars, it's all complete BS.
Absolutely. I mean, so okay, here's my example of what I did. I bought, after my Takamine, I bought this Ibanez guitar, and I bought it because it sounded good and it looked amazing, as you can see. When I go out and gig, I often take this guitar, which is a £400 guitar, as opposed to my £1,000 guitar, based on the fact that I know people love the look of it, and it sounds maybe 5%, 10% less nice than my Takamine, and is slightly, it's really nice to play. It's just not as nice as Takamine, but I know I'm going to get more people talking to me after the gig about the guitar. So I do it for that reason. So the gear is less important.
Well, I think as well, you've touched another nail on the head, is when you come to gigging as well. Ultimately, I find this funny. It's like when you're a gigging working musician, you don't want to be taking something that's nice and valuable out there, particularly when you're doing the pub and club circuit, where people are going to basically vomit over it and probably want to try and play it and attack you and throw things at you.
Or the stripper's going to put cream all over it, Neil. That's happened.
Completely another story. Still got that squirty cream all over my pedal board. But you know what I mean? I think, you know, that's one of the other things as well, is it comes down to that reliability factor. You want something that's solid and good and reliable, but, you know, if the worst case scenario, you don't want, you know, it's not going to break your heart if something really bad happens to it.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that, Preben?
Oh, I'm all for buying something that you know. People ask, not people stop me on the street and in the street. No, I've got friends and stuff who'll ask on like a custom shop guitar, as opposed to, say, you know, a £500 American Standard or something like that. And I always think, I mean, I've no doubt the custom shop, of course, is a better instrument. But if you buy the £500 one, and you take that £2,000 that you've saved and put that aside to buy yourself £2,000 worth of time to practice on the cheap guitar, I'll bet you any money that the cheap one sounds better when you're done practicing than the custom shop does. You get my point, because it's the time you put in. Again, as long as it's not completely impossible to play like your £50 Argos guitar. I mean, I bought an Encore acoustic about a year ago or something, because I've got a Yamaha acoustic which I like, and it's great and it's lovely, but the strings are a little bit too tightly spaced for me to get my fat fingers into. I do a lot of this, I don't know what you call it.
Playing.
Yes, very good. No, this stuff where you have to pick in between your thumb and your first finger, and then you claw your other fingers in there. I think they call it alternate picking nowadays, which was
hybrid picking.
Hybrid, which is very different to what we used to call hybrid picking back in the day. That was when you changed between sweeping and alternate picking. But yeah, hybrid picking, we'll call it that. And I just can't get my fingers properly in between the strings on the Yamaha, because there's sort of space like a Gibson acoustic, perhaps even a little bit tighter. So that is difficult. So I thought, yes, well, I can make anything sound great, me. So I'm going to buy this, again being left-handed. I'm going to go for this Encore that I found on wherever, Facebook I think it was, for £20. Now watch me go. So we went up, my wife and I, to Buxton, bought this guitar. I come back and I restrung it, and it's awful. It's absolutely terrible. And the strings are about a meter away from the fretboard, and it sounds rubbish. It doesn't stay in tune. Everything's bad. And I thought, of course, my next step is to, maybe I've got it set up properly, but I haven't gotten that far, because that would just be idiotic, I think. But my point being, that's obviously aiming too low. That's not going to work, because it doesn't stay in tune and you can't play it. And so you need to get in at a level where you get a playable instrument that you can use in a professional or semi-professional, or whatever you do, capacity. And luckily these days that's insanely easy, because you can pick up stuff on eBay, or even if you go to a shop and buy stuff, off the shelf, £400 will buy you a great guitar.
Yeah, I think we're in really fortunate times now with all kind of gear.
Oh,
whether
God
it be
almighty,
cameras,
yeah, absolutely.
Quality of manufacturing is so much better than it was in the 80s, 90s. So again, £300-400. Even I've got funnily enough, a Telecaster that I got for £200. It's absolutely fantastic. It was second hand, but it wasn't much more when it was new. We're really lucky today that we can buy great things. But I think we've hit on a couple of really important points here, and something I would always say now, echoing what you said, Preben, is buy a guitar that's good and is going to see you through for 10, 15, 20 years. That doesn't need to necessarily be expensive, or hopefully a lifetime. I think about it, it's actually a lifetime. When you think about the guitars we've got, I'm thinking one of Sanj's guitars in particular. He's a
Washburn,
M4, which is
N2.
Awesome. N2, sorry. You've had that as long as I've known you. That's a long time, and it's a great guitar. So a guitar is not just for Christmas, but you don't need to spend a lot. And what you probably should get more from is actually taking that money and investing it either in time to sit and watch YouTube videos, or probably even better than that, getting a tutor.
Absolutely.
If you want, yeah.
Or trumping that even more, picking up the guitar and playing it.
Yes. Can I also say that, you guys are obviously well into your recording, you're well into your gear, you're professionals in that respect, whereas I'm not. And I have found that because I kind of had to get into this gear idea, or felt I had this pressure to get into this idea of gear, that when I started recording music, then I've now got a bank of effects available to me that I can drag in, and I just felt I had to use them all the time. And it's been gear and effects and everything has been a massive hindrance to my actual creativity, because I felt I should be using these things, and then you spend hours exploring them all, but I have no real interest in it. Like you two, I reckon, have an interest in it and understand it. It just doesn't make sense to me. I want to hear a guitar. That's it.
I think my journey has been, and it's helped teaching, because I have to explain a lot of this a lot of the time. The reasons why is actually the gear knowledge. It comes from having a really big toolbox. Yeah, and all of this stuff is literally tools in the toolbox, and we probably all own toolboxes. How many times do we use all of those tools? Probably never. Some of them, they just sit in the bottom of a toolbox. But when there's that problem, when you've got to fix that weird joint on the back of a sink, having the right tool for the job is key. So a lot of it comes down to is knowing the question to ask.
Yeah.
I think in your respect, Sanj, is the music, and this is not I'm not doing it down, is in terms of its sound palette and its kind of spectrum is quite simple because it's mostly a guitar.
Yes.
Yeah. And in a sense, you're not needing a lot of these tools because you're not trying to add in 50 other elements and try and make them all sit together. That's when EQing and compression and all these other things have to come into play, because you're trying to use them as tools to make a jigsaw work.
Yes.
But if you're just making music which is limited in its frequency, and not that's
focused
BS.
Is what you want to hear.
Yeah.
It's not limited, it's focused.
Yeah. Then you don't need all these bits and pieces. The only thing is if you were that mindset and you wanted to be out there creating experimental sounds with your acoustic guitar as opposed to the music that you're doing, then they may again become important, because you'd ask the question, how do I get this out of the world sound that's floating around my head and bouncing all over the place? Then it's a completely different question. So gear comes down to ultimately, what question are you trying to answer? I think that's my finding.
Wow, I wish you said that to me 20 years ago.
It's taken me 20 years to figure it out.
Oh, but it's a very good point, because you're coming at it from a point where you say that I have a sound in my head. How can I get there? And that's the important thing to remember. These are tools.
Yeah.
It's very rarely you go down the stairs to look at the in the cupboard below the stairs. You open your toolbox and you look at them and you go, what can I use this one for?
Exactly.
Let me go and put something. No, you don't. You, as you say, if there's a leak, you look for the one that'll fix the leak or whatever. But of course, sometimes you can actually get inspired. Sometimes you'll stick up some sort of plug-in or a pedal or whatever, and you go, "Whoa, wow, we got to do something with this."
But that's another question, and that comes into this idea of creative flow. And that's exactly it. Is that if you're that mindset, and I think I don't want to speak out of turn for you, Sanj, but that's not you. You just want to write really effective music.
Yes.
You're not interested necessarily in the sound world.
No.
So yeah, gear is not important. I'm kind of conscious we're running out of time here, so let's go round in summary and throw the question out here. Yeah, how important is gear?
Very.
If you're of a certain mindset, it probably is worth exploring, because it will help you. But if you're like me, don't feel under pressure to actually go and explore that stuff if you're not interested in it.
Okay, Preben?
As long as you have the right stuff, it's not important at all.
Yeah.
And of course, that's a silly thing to say. It's important that it doesn't get in the way of your creativity. Apart from that, I think you can do pretty much anything with anything.
Yeah, I think I'd echo both of those sentiments and say it's not important. The only aspect, and this goes back to my early job working in a music shop, selling stuff, is buy once, buy right. Don't necessarily spend money on.
I would like to add though. I mean, I'm looking around my room here, and everything I've got is pretty much. I haven't got a guitar from when I was, 15 or whatever. Also, partially because the guitars you could get in the 70s in left hand, you wouldn't want to keep. Well, you couldn't get any of them. But sometimes the gear is really. I mean, this is probably the thing I've got that I've had for the longest time. Adam S3A monitors, which I've had for 20 years, and they were a revelation when I got them, and they still are. I love them, and I use them every day, of course, and it's brilliant, fantastic, and they were insanely expensive. But sometimes it does make a difference. So
that's the point I'm getting to. Is like, think wisely about your choice. Don't necessarily, and this is something again that I find with students all the time. They want to rush out because something's like they've seen something that's on offer for 50 quid, and it's like, and they can afford that, so they'll buy it, and as opposed to maybe saving another 50 quid.
Yeah.
And buying something which again is like your speakers, is going to last you for eternity. A classic example would be an SM50, 58 or 57 microphone.
Yeah.
What a good investment, because that microphone will last you for your entire life, You can use it not only for singing into or recording, you can use it to hit people on the head with. I don't advocate that. You know, you can knock nails into the wall with it. It's a great investment. And ironically, an investment which, when I bought my first one, probably in 1993, cost me £75. I do believe that they still cost £75.
Yeah, that's probably
so inflation. They're actually cheaper now. Anyway, we're up on time. Thank you very much, guys, for your time. Thank you, everyone, for watching this episode. What I'll say is, if you guys out there in YouTube world have got any questions, please do send them over or leave them in the comments below, and we will endeavour to answer them at some point. Thank you, guys. Take care, and speak to you soon.
Cool.
Thank you. Thank you. Take care.
Thanks a lot for watching the 3rd episode of Guitarcast. Love to hear your comments. I know it's a controversial topic, so please do leave them in the box below, and please do hit subscribe. Got another one coming for you very soon. Take care of yourselves. I'll catch you later.